I'm not gonna lie. I absolutely love how my beard hangs out the bottom of this helmet. Magnificent. Welcome back. It's Friday. I'm Captain Xavier. Actually, technically it's Thursday, but I'm going to be traveling tomorrow, so I'm filming this today. Deal with it. We've got Q&A. We've got Fanmail. Let's do this thing. First of all, I would just like to say, I'm still not taking commissions. Quit emailing me. Not taking commissions includes not coming up with quotes for commissions that I'm not going to do. I have a video on how I do my pricing. If you're curious, you can go check that out. Let's answer some questions. Meister Sin, what do you use to replace the foam in blasters like the Hammershot? I use craft foam. It can be gotten at Joann's or Michael's or any craft shop. It's usually about an 8.5 by 11 inch square. They come in thick and thin. You're probably going to want the thin. I use the thicker stuff for padding plunger heads. So, Alex Price, what is your opinion on Lego buildable action characters? I'm not a huge fan. I was never into large-scale action figures, so having Lego ones doesn't really tickle my fancy. But for those who are into them, I think they're really cool because they're infinitely customizable. Also, medieval helmets. Kettle, Armet, or Saleh? Saleh! And Milanese or Gothic? Gothic. I wore this just for you. Voidwalker. Captain, if you could integrate any blaster into an Apollo, what would it be? Probably a Zeus. Of course, now I could just buy a hair and save myself a lot of trouble. Brick built. What mods can you do to the Retaliator to greatly improve performance on a crazy low budget? You can't. If you want to greatly improve anything, it's gonna cost money. That's just how the world works. But to get some improvement, you can double the spring, usually. There's any number of Nerf springs that will work in it. Night Finders and those will usually work in the mag-fed blasters fairly well. I've never actually done a lot of that particular mod, so I can't promise how good it will work. But I've heard that you can just double up the spring. You can take out the air restrictor, which will give you some boost, but if you actually do a heavy spring, you run the risk of breaking the blaster if you dry fire. Which is why I generally don't remove ARs in magazine blasters. Single-shot blasters I'm not so worried about because they're a dime a dozen at Goodwill anyway. But you're not going to get great improvement without putting some effort into it, because you're going to need to replace the internals and do a brass breech or something like that, and that all takes a little bit of money. A full sealed brass breech isn't that expensive. The brass is $5 a piece, so you're looking at, and you need two sizes, so you're looking at $10. If you do a full sealed brass breech, you are going to need a spring upgrade, either doubling the spring or buying an aftermarket spring. They're also about $10. So you can actually do a fairly impressive upgrade for $20 or so, but there are limits. So, Creed King 18. In the account of character arts, which is better, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings / The Hobbit? I don't know that those are really good comparisons, because they're very different styles of stories. They're both in a medieval setting and a fantasy setting, but one of them is very much an adventure. There is an end goal that they are going for, that all of the characters are going towards, and yeah, they get split off and they go different ways, but it was always the destruction of the ring that was the goal, where there is no end goal in Game of Thrones except to control the throne, but nobody ever manages to do so for more than a couple of episodes. So it's really a very different narrative. It's more like the War of the Roses than like World War I, where the goal was beat the Nazis, and once you did that, you've done it. But War of the Roses was something that went on for many generations, and numerous kings were deposed, or the 100 Years' War. A better comparison would actually be Game of Thrones and the Silmarillion, which is a much larger story. The Lord of the Rings takes up less than a page in the Silmarillion. It's that much grander of a story. And I would go with Silmarillion just because I believe Tolkien was a genius and a better writer. George R.R. Martin uses a lot of shock techniques, killing people you don't want killed, and incest, and and all that kind of thing to keep things interesting, whereas Tolkien just created such a beautiful world with such interesting characters, and many of them die, and ones that you wouldn't want to, but they tend to die better. The people that die in George R.R. Martin's book tend to not die in glorious combat on the field of battle. They tend to get shanked at their own wedding, or, things like that. Whereas Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, they tend to die in glorious battle, in either massive field battles with, hundreds and thousands of dragons and orcs and elves and dwarves and men. So I prefer the Silmarillion. I reread it at least once a year just because it's amazing. A lot of people have trouble getting past the first chapter, which is like reading Genesis. But once you get past that and you get into wars of, with Balrogs riding dragons into battle, that is literally something that happens in the Silmarillion. Actually, that might happen in the Unfinished or the Lost Tales. But there was a battle, the Battle of Gondolin. Balrogs attacked the city riding dragons. They weren't the flying dragons. They hadn't been created yet. So they were the Great Worms, as they were called. But seriously, Balrogs riding dragons. And the elves were so grand back then, they were able to just charge up the dragons and take them on. So, yeah, much, much grander world than Lord of the Rings, where there's, a lot of orcs and maybe a troll. Whereas, bigger world in Silmarillion. Absolutely fantastic book. I don't recommend the Unfinished Tales because they're not finished, and you'll just get interested in it, and it'll suddenly go, and this is where my father quit writing, or this is where the notes got lost. The Lost Tales are a different thing. They've got stuff from both Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion put into the Lost Tales that are just fantastic. I highly recommend them. Andrew Marler. How do you start a Lego project like your castle and keep it continuously going? Force of will and cash. That project I've been building for many, many years. Like I said, the very first iterations began my freshman year in college, some 16 years ago. God, I wish I had pictures of the early stages because they were horrible, and I wish I had them just so that I could look at them now and go, "Ha! You peasant!" But I don't. As far as I know, no early pictures exist of my previous versions of my castle. This one started much more recently, probably 3 years ago at most. But it was still the same basic design that I had first came up with all those years ago, but never had the parts to implement it. And now I have the parts to properly implement it, and I realizing that making even huge changes that I thought would cost hundreds of dollars doesn't if you shop frugally. So, yeah. Having a goal is a big part of it. I knew where I wanted the castle to go. I knew where I wanted the village to go. Parts of that have been lost because my room is much smaller now than it was when I designed some of that. I had 2 more feet of space on the table, so there were an elven forest and a dwarven mountain that were supposed to be in there, but they ended up getting reduced. Someday I'll have a bigger place, or hopefully, and I'll get that era back, but yeah. Colin K. I play an elven wizard. What other characters do you recommend for beginners? Fighters. They're generally the easiest. Any kind of spellcaster, it gets kind of complicated because you have to know all the different spells, whereas I hit it with my axe is fairly simple. All the different feats that fighters get makes it a little bit more difficult, but generally it's nowhere near the complexity that you're going to have from a spellcaster, especially not a wizard or a cleric who've got access to all of the spells. Sorcerers, on the other hand, have much a greater limit. Yeah, I've played characters that had all the magic. That'll probably show up in a story time with Captain Xavier if I ever get around to starting that series. I'll talk about some of my dwarven characters and how some of them just went left at the traffic light and got a little weird. James Wriggle. Have you ever read the Sharps novels by Bernard Cornwell? No, I haven't read Sharps. I have watched all of the miniseries, the Sean Bean miniseries. Absolutely loved it. Wish I'd never watched the Waterloo episode because that just still angers me. But the rest of it I thought was fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Bernard Cornwell. I've read many of his books. I love his Archer books. Both the Holy Grail Search one and the one about the Battle of Agincourt. Loved those storylines just because I like English longbowmen just as a general concept. And I also very much enjoyed his Arthur. His version of Arthur was written as more of a historical. All of his stuff is historical fiction. And so he didn't write it as, the great Arthurian legend where he used to have knights in suits of armor and all of that, wearing armor that didn't exist until the 16th or 17th century, and yet they're supposed to be early England, which is 4th century, where plate armor practically didn't exist yet. But he wrote it from a historical standpoint, so Arthur wears scale, and Merlin is a druid, and, they're still having the vestiges of the Roman Empire, but are now warring clans and have issues with the Saxons and issues with the Normans and all of that. And it's absolutely fantastic. One of my absolute favorite quotes by any character ever is from Merlin in that book, and has to do with raising children. You should read it, and you'll know what quote I'm talking about. Jesse Nunez, which is your favorite series of blasters? The Gear Up series, 'cause it's in my colors. Caleb Carter, hey Cap, what is your favorite company or seller when it comes to aftermarket Nerf parts? I don't really have a single favorite. I get parts from Out of Darts. I get parts from Containment Crew. I get parts from Tactical. I get a lot of parts from Tactical because he lives right over there. But I don't have a single favorite. I have a variety of places I get stuff from. Trico Gamer 02. Captain, can you compare the present LEGO sets with the past LEGO sets creativity-wise? I still maintain that the golden age of LEGO was 1990 to 1992. Nowadays, the far too many of the sets are licensed stuff. SpongeBob and Minecraft and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and superheroes. And while I'm a huge fan of many of those things, I don't think LEGO is the right medium for them because it actually hampers the creativity because you have to build the set that's from that fandom. And I have taken, I loved having the Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings and the Pirates of the Caribbean because they were more castle and more fantasy and more pirates. I didn't get them because they were the licensed. I got them because I could use them in the non-licensed stuff. And they've also become way too dependent on specialty parts, which I find to be the opposite of creativity. I always liked it when they used standard parts to create new and interesting things, as opposed to just making that piece that you need to fit that role. It also makes it a lot more difficult to build sets that you don't have, because if you don't have all the specialty parts, you can't build them, whereas I can look up the instructions for old sets and not have to worry about whether or not I have the parts, because I know I do, because they were the same parts that were in sets that I have, just configured differently. So I like the old ones. Also because I'm an old man and I'm very nostalgic about that sort of thing. Nathan Jeffers. Hey Xavier, what's your opinion on some of the modded long strikes out there? I haven't really studied modded long strikes much because I didn't have a long strike for a long time. The only one that I've seen that I went, I am going to build that eventually, is the XBZ long strike, because it's gorgeous. It fits so beautifully and it's incredibly powerful, and I'd love to have one. I don't know where I'd ever use it. It's not going to be allowed in HVZ. It's too powerful. They're not going to allow it at the local Nerf Wars. It's too powerful. If I ever go to an all-adult, highly modded event again, then something like that might be useful. But until then, it's low on my list because I've got nowhere to use it. Vexidoodle. I like that. Hey, Captain. If you had to use a stock primary blaster for a war that is not Nerf, what would you use and why? The Sentinel, because it's magnificent and magazine-fed. The Super Drum would be the next one because it has such a high capacity and is also incredible while stock. But the Sentinel would still be my first go-to just because it's magazine-fed and it makes it easier to reload. Kin Kim DJ Productions. What is the difference between lore and history? There's minor linguistic differences between the two words. Lore is more the collection of knowledge about something, which includes past and present things. Whereas history is everything that previously happened to it. They're very closely linked. Like I said, minor, almost semantic differences if you really want to get down to it. Lore is more commonly used when you're referring to something that isn't real. That's not necessarily the case. If you go to a museum, a specific museum like the World War I museum in France, that would what is in there would be the lore of that area in World War I. It's also a demonstration of the history. Lore is generally we use that word when we're talking about Star Trek or Star Wars or Warhammer 40k or any of those things. We use the word lore because it's the collective knowledge of that thing, whereas history is generally stuff that actually happened. And since Star Trek and Star Wars didn't really happen, calling it history is not entirely accurate, whereas referring to all of the backstory and all of that as lore is entirely accurate because it's just the collected knowledge as opposed to the events that actually took place. At least that's my understanding. I'm sure somebody who actually has a degree in linguistics is going to tear me apart in the comments, and feel free, I'll put a note in the description what the actual definitions are. Johnny Miller, lots of questions. Question 1. What color and brand of paints do you use in your personal loadout? I now use black vinyl dye as the base coat for all of my blasters. I don't actually know the brand. I get it at O'Reilly's or AutoZone. They both carry the same brand. And then for the color, I either use Krylon Fusion or Rust-Oleum. I just got a different orange. The orange I had been using, I never liked because it doesn't go on very well, and I didn't particularly like it. So I'm going to try a Krylon Fusion orange and see if it's better or worse. Who knows? We'll see. Question 2. What blaster would you be most excited to see as a gift from a fan? Well, if Mr. Nathan were to suddenly up and mail me the Hellhound, that would make me pretty happy. Don't do that, please. I couldn't take it. If somebody were to up and send me a Select Fire Rapid Strike, that would excite me because I do want to build a personal Rapid Strike for wars. And I would like to have it be Select Fire, and I don't want to have to work it out myself. I'm sure I can, with an Arduino and all the right parts. I'm sure I can. I know people who know how to do it, people who sell it, who would probably be willing to help me out. But I would love it if somebody would just mail me one, and then I could just mod it to meet my standards. But yeah. Question 3. What, in your opinion, is the optimized sized magazine between size, capacity, and ease of fitting in a loadout? It depends. There isn't one. It depends on what you like, and depends on what game you're playing. Depends on what blaster you're running. Depends on how. There is no right answer for this one because there's too many variables. For HVZ, I run 18s because they fit in double AK pouches, 2 of them each, and I need lots of ammunition. In Nerf Wars, I've been moving more and more towards 12s because they're smaller, and I wanted my vest to be lighter and less bulky. But for some guns, 35-round drums are fantastic, but it needs to be usually low rate of fire and something that has recoil to kind of shake the magazine to make it feed. The 25-round drums, the newer ones, are better, but of course they don't hold as much. Neither of them fit easily into pouches, or at least not a lot of them. You can get a 35. I've got pouches that'll fit a 35 or a 25, but or 2 18-round drums, but it's not a efficient use of space. You can hold a lot more ammunition in 18-round straights than you can in either of those. So, yeah, it really comes down to what your personal preference. Do you know what the ideal FPS on a top-tier modded single-stage flywheel blaster is? No, and once again, this is a matter of preference. You could get one that would do 150. If I made mine fire 150 FPS, I wouldn't be able to use it either at the local Nerf Wars. I wouldn't be able to use it at HVZ because it's too powerful and they don't allow blasters that strong, which is why I don't do 180s for any of my personal stuff. I'll do 130s, and that'll get you around 120, depending on, various details, flywheel cages, flywheels, batteries. But 120 is about as high as I really want to go on any of my personal blasters, because if I go past that, I can't use it. So, yeah. And all of the things you listed, motor, lipo, flywheel cages, all of those are going to change what your FPS ends up being. But once again, it depends on what you're planning to use it for. So, question 5. If you had to pick a supernatural infection to be exposed to, what would it be? That's a tough one. There are versions of lycanthropy that I wouldn't mind, namely ones where you get to control it. That's some versions of the story you get to control when you turn, and you can turn whenever you want. Other ones, you can only turn during the full moon, but you get to decide whether or not you do. Others, it's only during the full moon, and you have no control over it whatsoever. You just turn and turn into a ravening beast. And that last one wouldn't be what I would go for. Vampirism, similar. There are so many different versions of it. If you go with the Bram Stoker, Dracula could go out in sunlight. He just looked a little nasty. Definitely wouldn't want the Buffy one with where you're actually a demon and the face and all of that. The True Blood one, the Blade one. Blade, I wouldn't mind being a Daywalker. That would be pretty groovy. Definitely not a virus or a zombie, because screw zombies. I don't like zombies. I think I'd handle immortality fairly well. That's the other thing, is certain versions of lycanthropes are immortal. And so that's one that if it was one where I got to choose when I changed, and I maintained my sanity when I changed, and it made me immortal, that would be fantastic. But now I'm picking and choosing all the best stuff, and there's no downsides, and that's cheating. So, I don't know. Ethan, H5494_. How do you store your Legos? I use Sterilite drawers. I found a massive sale on them at Walmart where it was like buy one, get one free. I think it was insane. And I bought enough to house all of my Legos. And I've got 3 large drawers and 4 small drawers per color. So 7 drawers altogether. The exception to that now is gray. I have subdivided even further. I actually had enough dark gray that I subdivided them into their own drawers. So there's 10, I think, small drawers. That sounds right. And then 3 big ones, actually. And then the black are also all in big drawers because I had so much more black. And then I've got smaller drawers for things like horses and monorail track and train track and all of that kind of stuff. Barbro's Studio, what college courses did you take? I have a bachelor's degree in computer science, so I took a lot of computer classes, a lot of math classes. For electives, I took a lot of history classes. I also took a lot of dance classes, and I took fencing every semester that I was there. That pretty much sums it up. I had to take all the usual ridiculous core classes. I took Latin for my language elective. So, yeah, lots of classes. Databases, survivable systems, information assurance, programming languages, system support, system software, operating systems, real-time operating systems. That was a fun one. Lots of computer stuff. Linear algebra was actually one of my favorite ones also. And discrete math was another one I really enjoyed. Because I'm a lunatic. Country Boy 07. What is your most memorable moment from all the Star Wars movies? As a child, it was the all-terrain armored transport scene on Hoth when the walkers came in. I just loved those. And on someday I will get back to working on my Lego walker project, but that's down on the list. Now it's the hallway scene with Darth Vader in Rogue One when his lightsaber lit up and the rebels are just like, oh boy, and then he just cut him to pieces. It was fantastic. I was absolutely amazed how much Episode 3 and then Rogue One changed Episode 4. in my opinion. You know, seeing the last duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and then seeing the new duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan, seeing Darth Vader cut loose in that hallway, and then seeing him fight Obi-Wan, you realize he is still as incredibly powerful as he was. Why is this duel with Obi-Wan so much different? And now we understand, we've got the backstory, and that they really didn't want to kill each other. But it had to happen, so, you know. Stormtrooper 1138. Where did you get the helmet? I assume you're referring to the Sturmhelm I had in the last video. I found it in a thrift shop in Fenn, Idaho, which is a town so small, it doesn't actually exist. It's a wide spot on the road between Cottonwood, Idaho and Grangeville, Idaho. And they have a grain elevator and a thrift shop. And I went in, and they had that helmet, and I had to have it, and I still do. Pop Star Threat. Being a fan of Lego, have you ever dabbled in Bionicle? No. Chaotic Cody. What is your favorite kind of Skittles? I like the original Skittles, but the pre-green apple ones, my favorite combination were the green and the yellow one. It was lime and lemon, and they went together beautifully. And the green ones, the green apple ones just aren't... I've never liked green apple as a flavor in general, and I'm getting used to it now because I've got 5 pounds of them. But deep down, it still vexes me. But what are you going to do? Lego Lane plays them video games. What do you think of the 17th Winged Hussars of Poland? I have always thought that the Polish Winged Hussars armor was gorgeous. It's just such a... In general, the design of it is very, very good. It's very segmented, very articulated. But then the wings are just neat. And they're designed in such a way that they don't look like they would be horrifically cumbersome. You could have made them much more of a problem, but the way they're designed, they look really pretty and cool. Kid Fury. What is the best Springer and flywheel blaster in modifying potential? Well, as with a lot of these kinds of questions, I'm going to have to say it depends on what you're going for, and it depends on what kind of a mod you want. If you want longest range, that's one answer. If you want highest rate of fire, that's a different answer. But I guess I would have to give the fairly stereotypical answer of, for Springers, the long shot, and for flywheels, the Strife. And that's largely because of how many kits have now been created for them. There are so many cosmetic kits for the Strife. It's amazing. I mean, almost any real gun you could possibly want, somebody has made a kit for it at this point. And the long shot, they have so many upgraded internal kits for it. You know, so many different springs, metal internal kits, metal catches, bolt spleds, pump action grips. All of those options really make them the most viable as far as what you can do to them. And plus, Strifes with the full auto kit gets rid of the whole semi-automatic shortcoming. The only other blaster that I know of, other than the long shot that has a lot of kits, Retaliators now have a lot of kits as well. And because they can take standard stock mounts, you have all of the potential of the different stocks, which you don't get with the long shots as much. But sheer power, the long shot really still can't be beat. And for versatility, you still can't beat the Strife. As far as actual potential, any of its any of its cousins are just as good as far as cages and wheels you can put in them. But yeah, those two are pretty much still top of the list. And finally, Darth Jawa. That would be a terrifying idea. 13. 1. What is your take on shields in competitive Nerf play? I really like the way they do shields at our local event. They allow them, but if they get hit by a rocket, you're dead, the shield is blown up, and it's out for the rest of the round. In our group, we've gotten so used to shields that there's almost always multiple people with rocket launchers. And then you get people who will move their shield out of the way so they can take a rocket to the chest so it doesn't blow up their shield, which is kind of an odd concept. But it's the way the rules work. They wanted simple rules. They wanted to allow shields, but didn't want them completely broken. Because if the shield can't be destroyed, they are broken. Because you can just make a 4-foot by 3-foot curved riot shield and you're practically immortal. The local group that I play with also limits what weapons you can use while wielding a shield. You can only use non-electric pistols, which really reduces your effectiveness, your combat effectiveness, but still gives you the defensive capability. Now, you can use hammer shots, you can use lawbringers, there's any number of pistols that are legal, but they really kind of need to be hammer primed because you don't have your hand free anymore. Smaller shields, like any shield that was actually produced by Nerf, so the Stonewall shield or the Stampede shield, those ones you can use with whatever blaster you want. But they obviously aren't very big, so they don't give a whole lot of protection. So it's well balanced in my opinion. And I think that should be an important thing that you keep in mind if you're going to allow shields, is there needs to be a counter to the shield. Either rockets or mega darts or what have you. Something that can take out the shield. 2. What is the average speed of an unladen swallow? What do you mean? African or European swallow? 3. What is your favorite era in Star Wars? Old Republic. But way Old Republic. Way pre-movies by 1,000 years at least, Old Republic. I was a fan of the era of Exar Kun and the Sith War. That's kind of the era that I really enjoy. I used to have all of the graphic novels for that whole era, but I don't know what happened to them anymore. They went away when I moved to college. They may be stored somewhere, but I kind of doubt it. All right, on to the fan mail. All right, we've got 2 packages and a letter. Let's take a look at the letter. Hey, Chaylo. Chandler is writing again. I was wondering if you could make a modular attachment for me. I have a pipe gun I built that has 1/2 thread to put on barrels. If you can make attachments, I will send it to you. My email is... I actually made one of these myself many, many years ago. Then I discovered drain blasters, and it was just so much easier. I'm not currently taking commissions, and making absolvers is kind of a commission. Email me and let me know what ones you had in mind. I might actually have some still in stock from way back when. But other than that, you're gonna have to wait until I open commissions again. But I really like that. They're really not very difficult to make. You just need the couplers from Home Depot, which if you've got the couplers that you use to build this, it shouldn't be that difficult to just super glue a coupler onto the back of a Maverick cylinder. Or make more interesting ones. Email me and let me know which ones you have in mind, and I can probably give you the idea of what parts you're going to need to build them. So, yeah, excellent. Alright, let's start with the small package. So I'm not going to put the contents of this on video. I'm going to have to contact the fellow involved privately because there's some issues there. Okay, bigger box. Let's take a look at that. Dear Captain Xavier, this is that promised care package. Inside there should be all kinds of goodies. First off, there is a thrifted X-Shot XS for your K26 series, a thrifted reactor, and a garage sale Maverick with lots of Sharpie marks, of course. I have also included 2 Scorpion belt chains, a Maverick cylinder, and the cylinder of a Busby gem, and your long-awaited Air Zone Stealth Water magazine. Sweet! I only know of this because I thrifted a Jaru Firestrike knockoff and found in a grocery store. There is another knockoff thing which I have found that is with its darts, so enjoy that, I guess. The 2 springs I included are the Home Depot 24K, maybe, spring, which is super strong. There is also a long shot front gun because it doubles up perfectly with the stock hammer shot spring. I did not know that. Months ago, I promised you shells for the Busby double shot. I have refined the design slightly and the manufacturing speed. They now work with every Busby shell ejection blaster. Sweet! And now only take about a minute to make one. I included 12. You, sir, are awesome. So you can refill a torrent, which I have. Sweet. They aren't perfect, but at least some should work. Working on making 300 of them. Good lord. So I can run my double shot and torrent at the E-Ban Wars. There is also a Rebel Fearless Fire in there, already modified. Sorry, but it is mine. I have included money for a paint job. You don't have to do it now or ever. Just please make sure you send it back. I would also include money for shipping. My contact info will be on the back. Please don't show. Enjoy the goodies, and please excuse my poor handwriting and formatting. I hope to visit from California one day. Thanks for being so awesome, Noah. Okay, let's check this out. Scorpion belts. Sweet. I don't know if I have belts for... I think I've got 3 scorpions now, and I don't know that I had 3 belts. So that is cool. Maverick. Fantastic. Some off-brand Night Finder looking thing. We will get to that in K26. A reactor? I don't know that I actually have a reactor anywhere. I mean, it definitely can't take, well, I would say it can't take a K26, but how can we be sure if we don't try? I don't know. What? What? Oh, I see. You squeeze it, and it shoots. Well, that's hilarious. Alright, the cylinder from a gem, and the cylinder from a Maverick. Lovely, lovely. A boatload of modified shells. I would love to know. That just looks like red pecs. That's fantastic. That would be much simpler. Sweet. I have to try to clean them up a little bit, but I like that. Aha! You know, I think I have the blue one of these. I like the gray one better. Aha! The squirt gun magazine for that, which, given that that thing was able to take a decent spring upload, I'm now very tempted. I'm definitely gonna have to brass the barrel on that and make it something worth carrying, just so I can have a squirt gun to spritz myself at the really hot wars. That is awesome. Thank you. Springs, cash, and a modified thing. So I assume this is what I'm painting and sending back to you? I can probably manage that. I just want to take one of these apart to look at it. I would love to build one that's more accurate. Wallcom's Rust Tommy gun one is beautiful. I would like to make one that's proper Tommy gun looking, but I don't have a Fearless Fire. So, all right then. That is magnificent. Never have too much cash. Okay, so paint job for that. Well, if you have any comments, concerns, questions, ideas, suggestions, if you want to have your question featured on the Q&A portion of this, put it in the comments section below in this video, and hopefully it'll get featured next week. If you want to send me something, my mailing address is in the description box. Anything and everything is always appreciated, and as always, thank you for watching.